what are the exploitative conditions. I think when we look at exploitative conditions of labor, we always have to think about it in the broader context of where the economy is going. And of course, the Sri Lankan economy cannot be thought about in isolation to the global economy. It is very much responding to local economic pressures, but as well as responding to global economic pressures, right? And I think in terms of getting a broad idea of where the economy is heading, there is a strong narrative and strong push towards urbanization, which has entered the national discourse perhaps in the 80s and the 90s, but today more than any other time, it's the urbanization fashion is upon us. So as we all know, the trend is to go towards urban hubs, various export processing zones surrounding their urban hubs, and the infrastructure to support these urban hubs, but also in connectivity with the global market and supply chains. So I think when we look at Sri Lanka as, say, 5 urban hubs, we can kind of get a picture of the transformation in land use as well as labor that is going to take place, that is currently taking place, but also going to take place in future. I think in terms of the reorganization of land, what we are increasingly seeing is because of the backseat that agriculture has taken, or rather the lack of investment in agriculture by the state, lots and lots of tracts of land are basically being declared as underutilized, or and it goes with the same narrative that agriculture is an unproductive enterprise in Sri Lanka. So a lot of people are being pushed out of agriculture into various other mostly self-employment ventures. I mean, if you're not an agriculturist, then the options for you, especially if you're in a rural area, are very limited. So, so there opens a trend towards casual labor. And of course, the casual labor can be repackaged and beautifully packaged as self-employment, but I don't think we can romanticize the type of casual labor that we have in Sri Lanka as entrepreneurship. I'd rather call it as necessity entrepreneurship or survival entrepreneurship rather, because there is no other option. They're choosing to drive trishaws or engage in any sort of casual work that they can find for the day. So that's one type of and then by structurally altering the economy in that way, you are creating conditions of exploitation, because none of these labor arrangements for casual workers, they are not secure. And of course, at the same time, you also see the state withdrawing its welfare measures gradually. Now, more and more we see insurance being introduced to us. And insurance being introduced to us is a first step towards saying, okay, now in future, it's going to be a private sector enterprise and no longer the government's territory, right? So, I mean, and another way of thinking about exploitative labor conditions is to look at the vast casualization or informalization of labor that we have noticed over the decades in Sri Lanka, and it's most visible, I think, in the industrial sector now, but also in the state sector. Many of the employees in the industrial sector as well as the state sector now increasingly they are working on contract as contract workers, and there are various arrangements that operate in the contract labor world, and we all know the role of the rapid proliferation of manpower agencies in the world of labor. And while manpower agencies sort of provide an option for workers to have flexible working arrangements, it also doesn't offer anything more than the daily wage. There is no employment benefits, come with it, and also in case of injuries or any kind of occupational hazards, there are questions about who can be held accountable. And we see this trend not just in industrial work but also in other types of areas, like in education. A lot of education, like lecturerships even, they are on contract, and actually the public institutions don't seem to have even a language to address the complications that arise when you're dealing with contract labor. And of course, in terms of unionizing, in terms of organizing resistance towards this, that's the second part of it, right? I think the old trade union model is perhaps becoming less and less appealing to people, at least the workers currently in the labor force that are perhaps in their middle ages or slightly older. Maybe the trend might be different for younger workers in future. But the old, I think the traditional trade union model is not geared to address why there is this casualization of labor. It's not geared or equipped to tackle why some workers actually go for casual work. Why is it that they do not choose permanent work, right? And so the response has always been no to manpower, ban manpower. But I'm afraid that's not going to be very effective or useful in formulating a resistance narrative in future, because you're not going to find the workers on your side. I think if you go to the free trade zone in Katunaiga, for example, in the morning at 7 in the morning, and go under the tree where all these manpower companies come to recruit them, you ask the people whether they would join a union, and most of them have in their previous lives when they were permanent workers. But why is it that they're now going as manpower workers, right? And I think what is important here is not to say that workers are choosing flexible work arrangements, but the question is as to what has become the labor conditions that they're opting to go with a manpower company. Why don't women who have children want to work as permanent workers? Because they can't, if they take more than one day off, they lose their allowance, attendance bonus in a factory, and that takes away a significant amount of money. And then also their basic pay is quite low. The model of targets, achieving targets, and the overtime models, which are fashioned after the Toyota company's lean production, right? And are these serving as good labor models for production in Sri Lanka? The answer is no, and that is why, whether permanent or not, the workers are choosing to go towards the manpower companies.